everything. Welcome back to another episode of the Emajae Talks Everything podcast, where I talk politics, pop culture, and everything in between. I am Emajae, and if you are listening to this pod or you are watching this pod on YouTube or wherever you are streaming the Emajae Talks Everything podcast, then I think it's important for you to know this is actually the 10th episode of my podcast. Can I please get a round of applause? I am so proud of myself, and I'm so excited and happy that we are 10 whole episodes in, and already so far I feel like we've talked about so much. So if you haven't already caught up on the past 9 episodes, then this is the perfect time to do so. Save this video, bookmark this video, whatever you have to do, go catch up, and then come back, meet me here, or after this video, go watch those, go listen to them. We have really had some good conversations so far. And I'm just excited that this is 10 episodes in. We have a long way to go. We haven't even scratched the surface of all of the things that we're going to be talking about. So I'm excited. Had to start off acknowledging that for this week's pod. Speaking of things that I do want to acknowledge, so yesterday we learned that there was a passing. And if you know, you know, but Malcolm Jamal Warner, best known for his role as Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show, passed away tragically. And we learned about it yesterday. Apparently he died from a drowning. He was on vacation. And it's when you hear about passings and deaths that happen unexpectedly, it hurts even worse. And my prayers and my thoughts are, out there for his family. And I think the whole community is just like, it's a mixture of just shock, and it's very upsetting. It is very upsetting. And, let this just be a reminder to us all. It's summertime. We're out there. We're having a good time. And this is not to speak on his situation at all. I don't know the details of his situation. I just know that he passed away by drowning. But I do know that it's the summertime and, we outside, but it's important that we are, safe outside and life is short. So take that as you may. And yeah, again, my thoughts and prayers are out to his family. So moving right along, this episode is going to be kind of interesting. So last week, if you haven't watched, which again, you should definitely do, my sister was on the pod and there wasn't really a bunch in the news that I wanted to talk about, that we wanted to talk about. So I spent the entire episode talking about what was on my mind, which was really talking about my relationship with my sister and siblings and all of those, fun things. And this week, there's nothing that I really want to go to in terms of what's on my mind, because a lot of what I want to talk about are really just me giving my commentary and perspective of things that I've seen in the news. So I'm going to actually go ahead and jump right into everything that's in the news. And as a special little caveat to that, I noticed that most of the things that I wanted to talk about were relationship oriented in terms of like romantic relationships. And so I just thought, why not just have a fun old pod where I just talk about my opinions and my perspectives of these different clips that I've seen throughout the week. Now, if you have been living under a rock, then you might not be aware of the main headline of the past week, which is the CEO and head of HR department who were caught cheating at the Coldplay concert. We gonna talk about that, okay? We're gonna talk about that, and I'm gonna give you my thoughts and my opinions of that entire situation. So you're gonna just have to stick around, because there's a few other things relationship-wise that I wanna get into before we get there, but just trust me. I have something to say, okay? And so now we are in everything in the news. I want to kick off Let me take out my little handy dandy notes. I want to kick off with a video, or not a video, but a clip that I saw on TikTok. Let me go ahead and get ready to pull it up. Y'all know, if you aren't already following me on TikTok, I need you to go do that. Emajae Armoni. My socials are always right around here somewhere at the bottom of the screen. So make sure if you are not following me on TikTok that you do. I be on the TikTok. Just seeing people's perspectives on different things. So that takes me to the first clip. Let me see, where are you, Kami Crawford? Because that's the clip. Okay, here she is. Okay, so basically, for those of you who do not know, Kami Crawford, actress, model, I believe she's a model. I mean, she's gorgeous. I think she models. Anyway, you might be most familiar with her from being a guest host on the MTV series Catfish. And she did that for a period of time, but I actually discovered her through her podcast way before and after that. And so she has this podcast called Relation Fill in the Blank. And she just talks about romantic relationships, family, friendships, just all aspects of it. I really enjoy her content. And she had a guest on her podcast. And so I want to play the clip that I found pretty interesting and give you my commentary on it. And just as a precursor, into the video, basically this woman was talking about how, you know, there's a lot of women, and so we're talking within the dating sphere right now, right? Throughout the course of this episode, we're gonna go from like dating to marriage to kids and like just giving different thoughts on each one, right? But right now we're talking about dating. And this woman was talking about how a lot of women want to be taken care of, want to be kept women, but how essentially there is a price that you have to pay in order to live that life most of the time. And so let's hear what she has to say, and then I'm going to give you my 2 cents on the matter. Let's see.
Someone taking care of you in a way that maybe you've never been taken care of before is very compelling. But when you give up the responsibility to take care of yourself, you also trade your agency.
That part.
Yes. You don't get to abandon the responsibility to take care of yourself without giving up agency over what happens in your life. Yeah. I too want to be taken care of. Who doesn't, you know? But I think when that is your primary goal, like when you are really driven by that pursuit, I want folks to ask themselves, what's this really about? What experiences have I had in my life of not being taken care of that I'm trying to make up for? The idea.
So that's the clip that I saw. And I wanted to talk about it because this is a conversation or just a topic that I've thought about quite a bit in terms of what is the price that we pay for wanting to be taken care of in relationships? And when I say wanting to be taken care of, I'm primarily talking about financially, like wanting someone to financially take care of your bills, to fly you out, to do all of the things, right? And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it's a nuanced conversation. That's what we do over here. We talk about nuanced conversations. Anyway, I wanted to talk about it because I think there's obviously 2 sides of it. What I think has happened is there's this society that has been created by the patriarchy. Let me just get into it. I was trying not to take it there, but there's no way to have this conversation without just kind of taking it there, right? We live in a patriarchy, and the structure of the patriarchy has been set up, has been created to where it's like men have traditionally been the breadwinner, and women, we were traditionally not, offered the same opportunities. So we were in the house, right? Over time, women got more access and more opportunities to take care of ourselves. So we do not have to rely on men the same way. With that being said, because we don't have to rely on men the same way, a lot of us look at relationships as, okay, this is something that, maybe I want, but in no way do I need you to rely, to sustain myself, right? With that being said, even though I don't need you to sustain myself, a lot of women feel like this is the system that you've created, men. Why can't I essentially exploit it? You want it to be the breadwinner. So if I'm going after your bread, there should be no problem. And to a certain extent, I get it. You know what I'm saying? Men have no problem being honest and straightforward about what they want in a woman. They want a model who cooks and cleans and who does all of these things. A lot of men, right? So I've never really understood the problem with the woman saying, you know what? I want something out of this too. For so long, I have not been able to demand, reciprocation in terms of what I get out of these relationships as well. I want something too. And if I'm already existing in the system where you're supposed to be the breadwinner, I'm going after the men who got bread. I'm going after the men who can take care of me. And so I do understand how we've arrived where we are in terms of the girlies who want to get flown out, the girlies who want to be taken care of. And let me tell you something. I will have this conversation many, many times on this pod. I'm sure I will be bringing people on to have this conversation. I am pro being taken care of, okay? I am pro a man financially taking care of business. However, I have always believed that there is an exchange that comes along with it. Money is power. And so if you are putting yourself in a situation where, you are being financially taken care of from beginning to end by a man, you do have to understand that there's a level of control that he will have over your life. And for that reason, as much as I want to be taken care of, as much as I would love for a man to 100% take care of all of my bills and all of the extra things, I actually don't prefer a situation where I'm not contributing to my household financially. And the clip that this lady was just speaking on in terms of the exchange of your agency is exactly why. Mind you, you can go out there and find a man who is a millionaire, a billionaire. But one thing that I think women have to remember is just because he has money does not mean that he is a giving man, okay? So yes, he might have all this money, but that doesn't mean that he's gonna give it to you. It doesn't mean that he's gonna give it to you without conditions. It doesn't mean that he's not gonna hold it over your head. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that you're with a man who has money. And if you are one of the girlies like myself who watches shows like The Real Housewives, I've watched The Real Housewives for years, and it is a sad, sad story when you see, which I have seen on this show many times. But when you see a situation where a woman is in this huge ass house, like mansion of a home, she has all of the bags, she has all of the shoes, but she's begging her husband for grocery money because she literally does not have access to any account. Right? She gets a divorce from this man and she doesn't know one thing from the other because she was left out of all of the financial decisions. And stuff like that really doesn't sit right with me. You know what I'm saying? To me, being taken care of is not worth my autonomy. It's not worth my decision making. And I think it's very rare to find a man who has, X amount of money to take care of you and him and the kids on one income. Then on top of that, you layer a man who is kind enough to want to even share that with you without conditions. It's just, there's always a price that you're gonna have to pay. And if you are the kind of woman who's like, listen, babes, you're saying all of this, I do not care. Okay, girl, I take care of the bills, take care of this and that. If he wants me to go left, I'll go left. If he wants me to go right, I'll go right. If that's you, more power to you, sis. More power to you, sis. I'm here for it. If that's what you want and you understand the conditions that are typically attached to that type of lifestyle. But for me, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I am willing to pay that price. again, I am of the belief that yes, I do want a man who financially is holding down the household. If I needed to take, time off of work, or if for whatever reason I did not have an income, yes, I want to be with a man who can take care of things, without me and spoil me. Sure, of course. With that being said, there is something about my brain and the way I think where it's like, no, you always have to have your own money. You know what I'm saying? And those are lessons that I feel like the older women in my family have always told me. Make sure that you always have your own means so that he understands you are not here out of necessity. Don't get it twisted. I'm here because I want to be here, not because I have to be here because I don't have an income or because you take care of every single one of the bills. Another thing with that too is, I will say for the record, again, I'm not going to go into this too deep today because we have other things I want to get to. I am not a 50-50 girly. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that right now. I am not in this patriarchy where women are not getting paid equal to men. You think I'm about to go 50-50 financially? I'm not doing it. Okay, I'm not doing it. With that being said, I'm somewhere in between. And I think there's always a sweet spot. There's always a conversation that you can have with your partner about what you feel comfortably, contributing financially, what they feel comfortable contributing financially. But yeah, ladies, I think what she's saying is very important. Like, don't sacrifice your agency for this idea of being taken care of, because a lot of the times it comes with these conditions that you just don't want on you. Like, who doesn't want to be able to move and operate and go get groceries, but you're living in this like multi-million-dollar mansion? It's just, I get how we've gotten here. Again, like women just kind of trying to reclaim their power and saying, okay, this is a system that y'all have created. Y'all are the breadwinners. Okay, I'm going to exploit that. I'm going to go on this date, buy my meal. I'm going to do this, but you got to fly me out. I get it. But I think it's also very dangerous when we go too far the other way, right? And so I just wanted to quickly comment on that video because I think she summarized a very, very important message that I think is kind of getting lost in this like city girl environment. Listen, I get it, baby. I don't want to, let's be clear. I'm here for the city girls, but I do think that we need to be aware also of kind of what can come along with that at times. So that's it for that particular video. And the next thing I want to talk about is, so I have watched this podcast called the Nice and Neat podcast for years, right? And it's essentially three guys and they talk about all kinds of things, right? But a lot of the times they talk about relationships. And I particularly enjoy their podcast because I feel like first and foremost, they have common sense. It's not often. It is not often that I sit down and I see a podcast or hear a podcast made up primarily of men or solely, comprised of men without walking away feeling like, oh my goodness, like where were these men raised? Like, where are they getting these ideas and perspectives? But with this particular podcast, I feel like, I don't agree with everything that they say, but I do feel like they understand nuance. They have a level of common sense. They don't hate women. I think, a lot of these men who are on podcasts are secretly butthurt because they've never, spoken to a woman in real life. And I think that the Nice and Neat podcast is a great perspective because you can really see how these men are working through like real life perspectives and relationships, but it's not rooted in like this anti-woman. It's really just rooted in like, this is life. And men and women, sometimes we don't see things the same. Sometimes we do. Let's talk about it. So let me bring up the clip that I want to talk about. So just to kind of give some context on this particular clip, it's very interesting. So what caught my attention about it was where, and you'll hear his name is Duke on the podcast. He started off by saying something to the effect of, is there a benefit to marriage? And I think that is just such an interesting question. whole bunch of stuff. Again, we're gonna listen to it, but yeah, I want us to listen to it and then talk. But sit on that for a second. Think of that. Think on that for a second. Do we feel like it's 2025? Do we feel like marriage still holds value? Okay, that's what I want you to think about as we watch this clip. So let's get started. Let's listen to what Duke has to say from the Nice and Neat.
I'm saying there's no benefit for men in marriage. The women are saying there's no benefit in marriage for women. Everyone's saying marriage is horrible, or it's hard, or it's challenging. It's not marriage. It's you. It's the person. You're the one who has to operate in the marriage. It is hard. Anytime you're dealing with somebody else, interpersonal relationships is challenging, but it's just not the way people are making it. The mindset I have going into it is just like, yo, if I continue to develop marital skills, and she continues to do the same, then we have a strong chance. What happens is people actually are not even equipped to be in relationships, let alone marriage. Whether that's a serious relationship or marriage, these things expose the skills that you don't have. You've always been a bad communicator. You've always lacked patience. You've always had anger issues. You've always been a selfish person. This is not new stuff. You've just been able to do it by yourself.
Right.
But when you include another person into it, there's someone you can't hide from anymore. So that person's not gonna like the things you're doing. So now it's just like, marriage is hard. But like conflict resolution, no one's good at it. No one's good at conflict resolution, bro. Anyone that says I'm standing on business is not good at conflict. No. People that stand on business is just to justify that you're actually bad at conflict resolution.
Right.
Yeah. And getting down to like what the issue is. Yeah. So you stand on business, right? You stick your chest out, right? And you double down because.
So you get the gist, okay? So I thought that he made a lot of different really good points in that, and I wanted to kind of take some of them, let's dissect it, okay? Let's dissect what this man had to say on this here side on this podcast, okay? So the first thing, is there a benefit to marriage? Of course there is. Of course, there is a benefit to marriage. Now, this is my opinion, okay? I believe that, of course, there is a benefit to marriage. I'm not even gonna go into the legal side of things, right? You are protected. Like, the law prefers people who are married. It just is what it is. We all know that, right? But outside of that, I do think that there is a benefit to still being married, even in 2025. However, I think what people are really getting at is the fact that the benefits of getting married in 2025 is not equal to what it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? So like when my great grandparents were getting married, the value that had for them, I don't think is the same value that it would play in my life if I were to get married tomorrow. As a woman, right, I just mentioned not too long ago, like we couldn't even buy land. We couldn't even have credit cards. Like there are so many like human basic necessities and rights that women could not have independent of marriage. So quite literally, the value of marriage for women is not the same. Especially now, again, we can go get jobs. We can leave the household. We don't financially have to depend on a man. So from that, respect alone, yeah, it's different. I also think, so that's generationally how I think value has changed. But I also think when you're answering this question, there is an argument that the answer may depend on your gender, right? Because I think that what has happened is a lot of times when you think of like a traditional marriage, right? The trad wife, right? You're talking about a woman who, cooks, cleans, is a primary caretaker of the children, is oftentimes, the woman is oftentimes the one who takes on majority of the emotional weight of the relationship. She's oftentimes the one who takes on the spiritual leadership in the relationship, or religious, if that's your testimony. The woman oftentimes, I think, ends up replacing these men's mama. That's the way, I think it can be summarized in traditional relationships. And so here you are, and you're entering into this space where you are expected to essentially take care of not only your children, but also to take care of a man. And historically, his only or primary job has been to be the breadwinner, the financial provider. And now in this economy, that's not even happening. You know what I'm saying? Most incomes are being shared between not just the man, but the man and the wife, or multiple parties, right? That's from a heterosexual lens, but accounting for, all kinds of relationship dynamics. The point is, most incomes or most households are relying on more than one income. So now, not only is the woman still primarily the child care person, and taking care of the household more so than the man, but that one aspect that the man was typically supposed to kind of like be the leader on, again, you got these men asking to split things 50-50. So it's like, again, when you're talking about who benefits the most from marriage, I do think that men in traditional marriages do benefit the most. Because here you are in a situation, you get to have the kids, but your kids are taken care of. You get the home, but the home is taken care of. You contribute to an extent, but we know that traditionally, culturally, a lot of those responsibilities do fall on the women. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening over here, okay? That's not what I would like for my household to look like necessarily. I am a huge proponent of partnership. Where you are weak, I am strong. Where I am weak, you are strong. We are both putting in 110% to make the relationship and the family flow, right? And I just think when you have two people who are equally invested, it works better. But when you have someone who is taking on more of the responsibility, that means that you have someone who is benefiting more than the other. And I do think that most of the times men do benefit from marriage more than women do. So yeah, on that one, I do think there is value regardless if you're a man or you're a woman or however you identify. But traditionally speaking, men are the ones who are going to get more bang for their buck when entering a marriage. So there's just that, which is very interesting because even though that's the case, women are still the ones who are the most conditioned to believe that we need marriage. And I think that's more of a cultural situation. When you get the ring, girl, you got the ring. Like, that is a prize. People look at getting the ring as like, the ultimate win. And it's like, okay, why are women being conditioned to care more about getting married than men when men are the ones who are going to benefit the most? Like, you really have to sit down and take yourself kind of outside of the matrix and really start putting these things together. Women are being conditioned to chase a ring and chase marriage, even though they benefit less, because the people who are pushing the narrative that they needed are the men who are the people who are benefiting the most, right? And so again, you really have to sometimes take yourself out of the matrix and get a sense of what's happening and why we are being conditioned to do and think the way we are. I think that tends to provide a little bit more, a little bit more guidance on where we are, if that makes any sense at all, right? So yes, that's in terms of value. So he made some other statements. One of the other things that he talked about was marital skills, right? He talked about marital skills, and he talked about how people don't even need to be in relationships half the time, but find their way into whole marriages. And they lack certain fundamental skills that they've always lacked. But now when you get into this relationship with this other person, you're being exposed, right? Because it's one thing to, lack humility. But when you lack humility with another person, now you're creating friction in your household, right? It's one thing to not know how to communicate, but when you don't know how to communicate with your partner, now conversations are not being had and resentment is growing tension is growing, and now it's showing up in your relationship. So the consequences double, they increase when you take your lack of fundamental skills as a single person, and instead of working on them as a single individual until you're really ready for a relationship, you just kind of dive right into this relationship that you're not prepared for, and hits the fan, And I just thought that was such a refreshing take to hear from a man. To be honest with you, I thought it was so refreshing to hear a man acknowledge something like that, because I don't think we hear that enough from men, that, okay, there are these skills that in your single season, you need to be working on. And sometimes people be entering in these relationships that they have no business being in. And I wanted to talk a little bit from that point. I did want to bring up this show that I have been obsessed with for years. It is called Couples Therapy, okay? And Couples Therapy follows this brilliant woman. Her name is Dr. Orna, and she is the therapist to all of these different couples. And you are literally sitting in on these conversations with these couples, and it ranges. They come in there for all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes they start off and it's a lack of communication, or it usually has something to do with lack of intimacy, whether that be, in the bedroom or beyond. It has usually to do with, lack of communication. They're just all these different issues. And they're usually surface level. And I say that they're usually surface level because what we find when you watch the show throughout the season, a couple will come in and they'll say that, the issue is A, B, and C. But over the course of their sessions, you really get a sense of, oh, your issue isn't the fact that you don't trust your partner. The issue is you were abandoned as a child, and when your partner does X, Y, and Z, it triggers you in this way, so you shut down, right? It's really getting and digging under and doing the work. And most of the time, the issue resolution starts with the couples, not as a couple figuring out the issue, but one individual understanding how their past experiences are playing a role in the problems that are happening with their partner. And when I heard this clip from Duke on the podcast, it really, really reminded me of that takeaway from the show, which is all of our experiences, all of our traumas, all of our perspectives on what should happen, what should not happen, what our partner should do or be, or what they should not do or what they should not be. We bring all of that into our relationships. And your partner, they're bringing all of their stuff into the relationship too. And what happens is little situations trigger all of those experiences, trigger all of those, past feelings and behaviors. And if they don't go, checked, if you're not doing the work as an individual human being, then you're just bringing all of that baggage into your relationship. And everybody has it to a degree. I truly do believe that no matter, it can be your dream girl, it can be your dream man. Most people have lived a life that they're bringing something into that relationship. But it's up to the individual to be working on themselves, whether that's in their single season or whether they're in the relationship and they're realizing how they're being triggered, doing the work as an individual, because you're really bringing all of that into the relationship. It doesn't get easier. I feel like that's kind of one of the takeaways too. Like, it doesn't get easier to navigate your personal issues when you get into a relationship. And your personal issues don't go away when you get into a relationship. So you have to be aware of that. And I think the show Couples Therapy really exposes kind of the individual work that a lot of people need to be doing on themselves or have not done on themselves, have not acknowledged, have not addressed. And that gets exposed once they're in that relationship, because now there is no running. There are real consequences. You know, you can't be delusional on your own. You have someone mirroring you and looking back at you and saying, this is a problem. Where is this coming from? And if you don't fix it, you'll either lose your relationship or you'll be unhappy in your relationship. And so I just thought that that was something that Duke said that I thought was pretty interesting. And I think it again plays a part in exposing people's lack of marital skills. And I always wonder, like, why do we not have these conversations more? Like, I would love to get some of my friends who are married on the podcast. And I think I really just want to dig into their thoughts about what would you have worked on before you got married? You know, when you were single or when you were dating, like, what personal things, looking back now, would you be like, you know, that's something that I really should have focused on a long time ago. That would have been helpful in my marriage today. And I just don't think that we spend enough time talking about the tools that are necessary to have healthy relationships. We spend so much time talking about planning the wedding. And trust me, no shade to any girl out there or guy or anyone who, you know, has their wedding plans already. Because baby, when I tell you, I get you, I feel you. But those types of things, right? Like the wedding or getting the ring, that is so surface when it comes down to the meat and potatoes of the situation, which is, are you ready to be in a relationship? Like, for real? Are you ready to be in a marriage? Like, for real? And what are the skills? What does marriage really look like? What does marriage really entail? Are we having those conversations with our partners, or are we just like, oh, well, I like being around him, he's a good time, but we're not having any other conversations about what a long-term healthy relationship looks like with them? All of these things I think are very relevant, and when we're not using language or having conversations about what it really takes, I think it's that lack of conversation that contributes to these failed marriages, that contributes to these failed relationships. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there is no instruction manual, but there is work that we can do before we get into those situations that I think would help us eventually. And so I thought it was really refreshing to hear that perspective, especially coming from a man, because honestly, I feel like women, we have these conversations often, maybe not often enough, but I think it's very rare to hear such a grounded take from a man, if I'm being honest, especially on these podcasts. I don't know what these men be talking about half the time. So I appreciated that perspective. What else? Oh yeah, I hit everything on that for the Nice and Neat podcast. So we've talked about things from like the dating perspective, right? Which was from Kami Crawford's podcast, Getting the Bag versus, you know, keeping your agency. That was a clip that caught my attention in terms of like marriage and marital skills and whether or not there's value to marriage. And so I want to briefly talk about a clip that I saw from Michelle Obama's podcast, which I am a huge fan of her podcast. I really love hearing her perspective. I think she has a lot of wisdom, in her and her brother. But this past week, the one and the only Barack Obama, her husband, was on the podcast. And they were talking about like raising children on the podcast. And the brother asked Obama, I don't know if we really need to watch the whole video. I'll just talk about it. But her brother actually asked Barack, like how did you raise your kids? Like, what was the most important decision that you made when it came to how you wanted to raise your children? And actually, it's Barack Obama. Let's listen. Because I can't summarize Barack. Barack got to do Barack, okay? So let's listen.
Taught them numerous lessons. And I just want to hear from Barack how you approached raising your daughters, because this was obviously before you got to the White House. So you were just like the rest of us, just a regular dad who's having kids and going to work and trying to make time. What was your strategy?
Well, first of all, the most important strategy, whether it was a boy or a girl, was having the right partner. And now that I'm not, that I say even behind her back.
Yeah.
Every one of my young male staff members, when they talk to me about dating and relationships and what to look for.
Obama giving advice? Okay.
Look, the starting point is this person is going to raise your children alongside you. And so I'll be honest with you. Michelle being Malia and Sasha's mom, that made all the difference. And then I do think
that made all the difference. Now, I'm going to talk about this briefly because, again, I'm wanting to just kind of go through just some high level, takes on relationships and all of the things on this pod. It's kind of a primer because we really need to address each one of these topics on its own in much greater detail because I have so many thoughts on each one. But when I originally watched the podcast, right? And Barack Obama said that his partner made all of the difference in his strategy for raising his kids. I just wanted to flag that and emphasize just how important that statement is. I know for me, one thing that I always think about when I'm dating someone is, what will this man be like as a father? Right? And I've had this conversation with friends before and they've told me, girl, like, just date the man. But my friends, they think I'm a little much sometimes. But anyway, they're like, just date the man, just get to know him. And I do, but it's hard for me sometimes to get to know a guy and not think about what he would be or how he would be as a father. Because ultimately, what are we doing? Ultimately, I know that I want marriage and I know that I want kids. And if you are going to be the father of my kids, then I can't help but to think about, are we on the same page about what that looks like? Because it doesn't matter what we do after those kids are here. Once they are here, I am their mother and you are their father. Okay? Whether you are a present father, whether you are an active father, or whether you're not even around, it's still going to make a difference. It's still going to impact my kids. And so as a mother, as someone who wants to be a mother, one of the most important decisions that I can make from jump is making sure that I do my best and do my due diligence and making sure that I pick a man who I know will be an incredible father. Okay, picking a man who I know, even if things, God forbid, things don't work out between us, you're still going to be an amazing father. That is so important to me. And it's something that it's so hard for me to not think of those things. Like, okay, is he caring? Is he attentive? Is he smart? What is his opinion on these different topics? Not because I'm solely concerned about how these topics might play into our, romantic relationship, but I'm not trying to raise one of those, red pill podcast guys who are just talking crazy out of the about women. I'm not trying to raise that. I'm not trying to raise a male identified pick-me girl who, is just out here in these streets looking for anybody to validate her because she didn't get enough love from her daddy. That's not what I want for my kids. You know what I'm saying? And life is not perfect. I don't think most men or women go into relationships thinking that they are with someone who's going to be an ain't-ish mom or an ain't-ish father. I don't think that. But I don't think, on that same token, that enough people are taking the time that it takes to really assess whether or not someone is going to be a good parent. It's not enough that you like them. It's not enough that you're into them and that you want to be with them. This man doesn't know left from his right. You know what I'm saying? And you want him to be the father of your child? I don't think so. Another thing that I wanted to talk about here is, are people having conversations with their partner in advance about what it looks like to raise their kids, right? And I think about this all of the time because, I want to have all the conversations. Okay, let me step back. I think that at most, what tends to happen is people have the conversation of do you want kids? Do you not want kids? Which is great. I think obviously that's very important to be on the same page about whether or not, you want kids. Fun fact, a deal breaker to me is a man who does not want kids because I do want kids. And I don't believe in really convincing people, you know what I'm saying? If you tell me you don't want kids, I'm going to take you at face value. I'm not going to convince you. I do think that people change their mind, and I do think that people evolve. And so there's definitely room for that. But if a man tells me he doesn't want kids, I'm telling you right now, there's nothing here for you. Okay. I'm telling you that right now. However, that cannot be the end of that conversation. People, in my opinion, don't have enough conversation about what that looks like. So, for example, if we have a kid and our kid comes out and is gay, if we have a gay child, how do you feel about that? I know how I feel about that. I don't care. Okay, if my kid is gay, I love it for him. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. I know that there are a lot of people who would disagree. I know that there are a lot of men out there and they're I don't play that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, whatever. But to me, that is a very important issue. I need to know where you stand on that because I'm not going to make my child feel less than because of their sexual orientation. That's just not going to happen in my household. So if we're not on the same page about that, we're going to have to really figure out what that in between looks like. And if we don't come to a resolution, then that's a conversation that we really need to have about whether or not we're right for each other. What are some other things? Religion, right? If you're super religious or you're not religious at all and you're with someone who's on the opposite side of the spectrum, if it was just the two of you, you might not care. If you have kids, now do you care? Okay, how is that gonna look in raising your kids? That's a conversation that people should have. Discipline, structure, you know what I'm saying? I've said before, I am not someone who is looking to whoop my children. I'm not putting my hands on my kids. My kids will be disciplined. They will know consequences. They will know that I don't play that But the way that I want to go about implementing structure and consequences is just different than, other people. And that's fine. Again, it's a conversation that we need to have, not when the kids are here, but before the kids get here. And one of the main ways that you make sure that happens is by having those conversations early, because who you partner with is fundamentally going to shape who your kids become. And I just wanted to, they talked about so much in the podcast. I definitely recommend, with all of these pods that I've mentioned so far, Kami Crawford's podcast, Nice and Neat podcast, and Michelle Obama's podcast. Definitely recommend, if you like topics like this, to go out, watch the full interviews, and keep up with their podcast for sure. So I just wanted to flag that. We talked about a little bit of my opinions on dating, a little bit of my opinions on marriage, a little bit of my opinions on kids, and now I want to talk a whole lot about cheaters. Let's get to it. Now, we have all seen the headlines. We have all seen the videos. If you haven't seen the video, I don't know where you have been this week. But last week, there was a Coldplay concert. And we all know that, you know, when you go to concerts or even when you go to like sporting events, like they have the you know, cameras go around, scan the audience, and you might get on the big screen, and usually it's an exciting moment. Usually it's a fun moment, you know, usually you're looking forward to it. Well, Coldplay was having a concert and the cameras were going around. They got a particular couple on the screen. The couple was just, you know, they were arms locked, you know, they was jamming, they was doing getting their thing. Okay, they wasn't dancing like that. Okay, they wasn't, you know, they was just vibing, but whatever. They were vibing together, okay? Arms locked and everything. When I tell you, as soon as the camera put them on the billboard, the lady's face went into an immediate shock. She covers her face, turns around, the man ducks. It was so awkward. It was so obvious that they had just gotten caught in the act, like immediately. And even Coldplay was on the mic and they were like, yeah, it looks like they just got caught having an affair. And that they did, okay? They in fact got caught having an affair. It was Astronomer CEO with his head of HR, both who are married to other people, both who have kids with other people, caught cheating in 4K. And everybody has been talking about it. It has been everywhere. And I thought that I absolutely had to talk about it because this is the perfect example of, I know people don't like this word, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. What is done in the dark will always come to light. Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen? Okay. What is done in the dark will always come to light. And sometimes it happens in the most unexpected ways, but it will happen. And listen, this man has since resigned from the job. I don't believe that she's resigned or anything yet, but I'm sure it's coming. If I'm being honest, like there's no way that you can keep your credibility, your dignity at the job when you was just caught cheating with the CEO. Like, no, like I'm sure if she's not already out the door, then she'll be out the door soon enough. But he's already out of the door. He's already resigned. Okay, i.e. fired, but resigned. And I just wanted to talk about this because I've seen so many different perspectives, of course, and so many different opinions. One thing people have thrown out there is like, you know, karma. Karma, you know, now he's lost his job and he's lost his family. And listen, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't feel bad for this man or this woman at all. I do believe in karma. Okay. I do believe that you reap what you sow. I do believe that what you put into this world, you will get out of this world. And one of the most important aspects of this conversation that I think is kind of being glossed over, which it's typically glossed over, is just how detrimental cheating is and the severity of cheating. I think we live in a culture where it's kind of like this perspective of everyone's going to get cheated on. You know what I'm saying? Like people say it all the time. I've heard so many women say, girl, a man is going to cheat as long as, you know, he does it respectfully, as long as I don't find out about it, the man is going to cheat. And I have always rebuked that energy, okay? I do not move about in my relationships. I do not move about in this world thinking that, you know what, the man is just gonna cheat. Those are not the games that we play over on this side, okay? I think that when women say that, it's really a reflection of what they believe that they are worth, right? Because it's like you're already setting yourself up for disappointment and you're already making an excuse, right? If you're leading from the perspective of, girl, a man gonna cheat, then it's like you're already setting the tone for it to be okay that he's going to do that, as opposed to being like, listen, I don't deal with cheaters. If you want to cheat, if you want to be with someone outside of me, then I'm going to give you the ability to do so. Go do it. But I'm not going to sit here and give, and this applies to men and women, but I'm just not leading from the perspective of, everybody cheats. The reason being is cheating is so much more severe than I think people realize, because it's just so casual and just, everybody does it. I think that we have really lost the plot. And I think we have really, really, watered down the impact that cheating has on someone. Imagine being in a romantic relationship with someone and you think you know this person. You think you know where this person is. You think that you know what this person feels. And you think that you're on the same page. And one day you look up and you realize that they are a completely different human being, that they have betrayed your trust, right? That their character is not what you believed it to be. How do you just bounce back from that? How do you bounce back from that? I don't know. But it's definitely a mind, a mind you fill in the blank. People walk away from situations where they've been cheated on and they forever are impacted. They move into their next relationship not fully being able to trust, because last time they did give their entire trust to someone, they were fooled, right? So it's just like when you cheat on somebody, it's not just this casual thing. It's not just, boys will be boys, or, no, there's another person on the opposite side of that. And I don't think that we should lose sight of that. I think cheating is deceitful. You know what I'm saying? It's not cool. If you want to be with multiple people, I don't think that that's an issue inherently. If you want to be with 10 people, go be with 10 people. The problem is you want to be with 10 people, but you have presented yourself as someone who wants to be in a monogamous relationship. Okay? And so instead of being honest with your partner, you are being deceitful. Okay? And then on top of that, let's talk about people who are physically cheating, right? Because there are multiple ways that people can cheat. I think cheating is defined by the people in the relationship, okay? Now, I know what I think cheating is. You might disagree, okay? Because, let me tell you, it's, but when you are physically intimate with someone outside of the person who you are saying that you are in this monogamous relationship with, listen, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because I said I was going to keep it real on this podcast about how I feel and about my opinions. I think that when people are out there being physically intimate with people outside of their romantic partners and their partners are not aware, right? They're cheating. I think that you are now playing with some major consent issues, right? Because it's one thing to be physically intimate when you think it's just you and one other person. It's another thing when that person is out there being physically intimate with someone else and you are not aware. You did not consent to that. You did not consent to that. Okay? And I think that just sheds a little bit of light of what I mean when I think that cheating is much more severe than culturally we give it credit for being. And I also think that when it comes to, stepping out on a significant other or cheating on a significant other, I do think that people should be held accountable. If that means you lose your wife, you lose your family, you lose your man, you need to be held accountable, in my opinion. Now, when I was a younger Maj, right? I think I was a lot more judgmental. I was a lot more like, if a man cheats, boom, I'm gone. Oh, he cheated, boom, why is she not gone? As I've gotten older and I've just, gotten older, I guess, more perspective, you see different people's situations and relationships and you understand the world a little bit more. I'm definitely a lot less judgmental about women or men who stay after being cheated on. I think because the reality is people have whole lives and whole kids. And so sometimes it is a situation where it's like, okay, you went out one night, you did your thing. I'm not going to throw away, this 20-year marriage, all that we built together on this. I guess I can see that. I'm not saying that that's me because I'm going to be honest. Once the trust is gone, the trust is gone. Okay. That's me personally. I'm not the kind of woman who, is interested in being in my man's phone, checking my man's DMs. I'm not the kind of woman who, is trying to be riding around the corner in the sunglasses, shades, checking that he's where he said he is. That is not my vibe. Okay. That is not my vibes at all. I think the hallmark of a healthy relationship is one built on trust. So for me, once the trust is gone, once the trust is lost, fundamentally, it is hard for me to facilitate or navigate being in that relationship. You know what I'm saying? That's just me. But I do understand that there are certain situations where people stay. However, even if you stay in that relationship, I'm hoping that you hold these people accountable. Because again, it's not just a simple, oh, I stepped out. It's not just a simple, oh, I was unhappy in a relationship, which, by the way, newsflash, being unhappy in your relationship is not an excuse to cheat. Let me rewind and say that again. Being unhappy in your relationship is not an excuse to cheat, okay? If you are unhappy in your relationship, there are like 45,000 things you can do before you cheat. You can communicate to that person. If that person is not taking your communication, is not listening to what you're saying and actively changing, then guess what? You can leave. Okay? You can leave. I don't think that people are ready to hear the fact that there are very, 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 very few circumstances in which quote unquote cheating, in my eyes, is probably okay. For example, I just said that if you're communicating that you don't like something, then you can leave. Say you're in a situation where maybe you can't leave, right? Like you actually can't leave. And you are, interested in someone else and you find safety in that person. Okay, maybe, technically that's cheating because you're with someone outside of your relationship. But if you're in a situation where you actually can't get up and leave, then there's some major red flags going on there, right? Okay, so we're not talking about those kinds of relationships. We're talking about relationships between people who have autonomy to get up and move around the way that they want to. In those situations, yeah, you being unhappy is just not an excuse to cheat. Do something about it. Go to therapy. Figure it out. But we're not going to sit here and excuse the fact that people are just out here doing whatever they want to do. And I think that more of these situations are going to happen. More people should be exposed when they are cheating because it is not cool. What else did I want to talk about? Yeah, and the selfishness associated with people who cheat. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I think it's about time that we start holding people accountable and calling a thing a thing. I'm not sorry. The selfishness associated with people who cheat. I mean, he put his livelihood on the line, which, and let me check my bias. Not just him, her as well, right? Both of them put their livelihood on the line, right? Which is ultimately going to affect their ability to provide. You've lost your positions. That's finances right there. Now your family's exposed. Now your children are having to deal with this public ridicule. Their mental health is on the line. Even if it didn't happen publicly, what if it would have just happened, and they found out any other kind of way? Still, your selfish desire was prioritized over what was best for your family. Yeah, I think you should be held accountable for that. Yeah, I don't feel bad for you for being exposed. I do not. A lot of people are talking about this situation and it is funny, okay? I don't know if y'all have seen, but there's been like a lot of people like at different games and stuff, like playing around, and like when they get on the screen, they'll, kind of mimic the situation. So it has been kind of hilarious. I'm not even gonna front. It has been kind of hilarious, to say the least. But with that being said, I think it's important of the culture, and it's important for us to just call a thing, which is calling out cheaters. A question for you in the comments, let me know. I'm typing because he did a press release, and I want to find the press release and maybe read it. But I want your opinion. Do you think that once a cheater, always a cheater? What do y'all think? Do you think once a cheater, always a cheater? I think that just because you've cheated once doesn't necessarily mean that you'll cheat again. I do believe that people grow and people evolve. I think that, sometimes when people cheat, they do feel like they had no other choice. Obviously not saying that it's right, because I just talked about how they had like 45,000 other choices, right? But I do think that people get in situations where they make bad decisions and consequences ensue and they learn from them. So I don't necessarily think that just because you've cheated before, you'll do it again. I think that if I found out someone that I was dating had cheated before and they told me, hey, yeah, I've cheated before, I would not consider that like a deal breaker. I would not consider it a deal breaker. I would consider it a yellow red flag though. I would, because now I have all these questions like, okay, what was the situation? What did you learn? What have you actively done since then to reconcile that? What have you actively done? What mind shifts have you experienced to where you wouldn't go back down that same avenue? And because you've done it before, now it's like, okay, I know that you have a propensity to do this. I know that this is something that you are capable of doing because you've done it before. And for me, how could that not be a red flag? How could that not be something that I take notice of? However, I can't consider that a deal breaker, because I do think that circumstances and situations change. People grow. People do things when they're like 19, 20, and then they'll be like 35. Like, there are nuances a part of it, but the reality is you have to learn from the mistake. And the only way to learn from the mistake is for there to be consequences. Not unfortunately, but in this particular Coldplay situation between the CEO and the HR lady, listen, this is a major consequence. Like, being publicly exposed, that public shaming, that is like the ultimate consequence. So I would hope that they, see what it has done to their life and to their kids. If they don't care about their spouses, then okay, fine. You're probably about to be divorced anyway. But I hope that you learn that deceit and betrayal is not okay. That is violence, and I hate to be so just kind of like matter of fact about it, but it is violence. When you are harming people in that kind of way, that is emotional violence that you are ensuing on someone else. And I am not okay with our society and our culture just kind of brushing over what it is to cheat. I'm not cool with it at all. Don't be out here cheating. If you don't want to be with somebody, then don't be with them. Leave. Leave. I'm trying to look for the press release. I saw it somewhere. I think I saw it on TikTok. Oh, NBC News. Let's see. I remember reading it a few days ago, and I just completely thought it was absolutely ridiculous. Basically, I can't find it right now, but I'll stick it somewhere on the screen. But I do want to talk about how when I read the press release, I felt like there was such a lack of accountability on his side. And that's what I mean by consequences, right? Like if someone cheats, there needs to be consequences so that there can be change. And in reading the press release, I just feel like the way he looped in, oh, I'm entitled to privacy. Sir, you took your mistress to a public event, okay? Y'all weren't in no little regular smegular seats. So you got a box or some special, seating situation. Y'all were in public doing all the things, and you want to sit here and talk about something you were entitled to privacy. No, you were not. You were not in your house. You were not, in a hotel room alone. You were in a public space with thousands of other people. You were not entitled to privacy. And the fact that you felt the need, okay, to loop in this idea that, oh, yeah, I'm sorry to my wife and blah, 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 but I'm entitled to privacy and that should be respected, just goes to show that you don't even understand that this is your fault. This has nothing to do with Coldplay. This has nothing to do with the cameraman or woman. This has nothing to do with your so-called entitlement to privacy. This has to do with the fact that you made a decision to breach your vows to your wife. You made a decision to put your livelihood in jeopardy, to put your family in jeopardy for your own satisfaction. You cheated. Just call it what it is. Just call it what it is. That's what it is. And so now you're gonna have to pay the consequences. Period. Same thing goes for her. And I know I feel like she is being kind of lost in the conversation a little bit because I don't know. I think there probably is a little bit of a bias when it comes to cheating. The idea that, men cheat more, blah, blah, blah. Listen, nobody is off the hook over here. A cheater is a cheater. I don't care if you're a man. I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care who you are or what you identify as. If you cheat, the same standard applies. So it's the same thing for her. I didn't see no stupid, I didn't see no press release from her or anything that sounded stupid. She is, head of HR, so maybe she has some kind of I don't know. But the point being, take accountability for your actions and the predicament that you are in. Okay? This whole situation, this whole week has hit all over the world. Start by taking some accountability, dog. It's really that simple. And I think when you're dealing with someone who has cheated in the past, I think that's one of the number one things you have to ask him or her, right? Is okay, so what do you think about that situation? Are you taking accountability when they're talking about the fact that they have cheated? Did they take accountability for it, or are they making excuses for it? That is a telltale sign of whether or not they are likely to do that with you or whether or not they have really learned their lesson. But yeah, I think that cheaters, Cheaters. I'm not here for it. I'm not here for it. And I think we need to go back to making it very clear that cheating is not okay. Don't listen to the Summer Walkers of the world. I love you, Summer. Okay? I'm here for you, Summer Walker. But if you hear a woman talking about some men are just gonna cheat, that's what they do. As long as he doesn't, embarrass me in public, as long as he cheats respectfully. That is a paradox in itself. There is no way to cheat respectfully. Cheating is fundamentally being deceitful, okay? You cannot respectfully deceive someone. It literally doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And I think it is a reflection of someone's self-worth for them to think that it's just okay. And I think as a culture, we have to do a better job of making sure people understand that cheating is not cool. It doesn't come with the territory. You can find a man, you can find a woman, you can find someone who is willing to go through all the 45,000 steps before they decide to cheat. And with that, I'm going to close everything in the news. and the relationship edition, I guess you can say. I think I've gone through quite a few different perspectives and topics on relationships, and I want to close it out here. Like I said, this was basically like a primer of all of the conversations that we can have around relationships. I am absolutely going to bring some of my married friends on, some of my single friends on, people with kids, people without kids, and dig into all of these topics a lot more, because there's a lot more that I can say about each and every one of them. Like, literally, this video is just scratching the surface, but I thought it was a fun topic to talk about, because everywhere you look, you know, there's a conversation about relationships and what people should do in them and what people shouldn't do in them and how they've evolved and this and that. And I'm kind of obsessed with it all. I love talking about relationships, and I hope to do so more in the future. With that being said, hey, if you have not liked this video, if you have not subscribed to this channel, then you need to go ahead and do it. And that applies if you're, you know, watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, whatever. Make sure that you are doing what it takes to stay in contact, to stay on, you know, on on notice, like notified, I guess, on what we're doing on the Emajae Talks Everything podcast. We are a whole 10 episodes in. We've already talked about so much. I'm so excited to keep the conversation going. With that, this is episode 10, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.